tonight, as the impeachment inquiry heats up.
Speak the truth. Let us work together to have this be a unifying experience, not a dividing one for our country.
The president tweets back, adding fuel to the fire. The rhetoric in Washington intensifying.
We don't know
The Inspector General says there's an indicia of arguable political bias. That is Washington speak for this guy didn't like the president.
Plus,
it felt like I was having a heart attack, and it was just insanely scary.
the death toll from vaping-related illnesses is rising across the country. And Google draws new congressional scrutiny over antitrust issues. And a happy Rosh Hashanah from our own Pat Robertson. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation.
Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm John Jessup.
And I'm Jenna Browder. Well, tonight we begin with the latest on the impeachment battle as House Democrats began the process today. The whistleblower at the center of the impeachment investigation could testify in the House very soon.
CBN's White House correspondent Ben Kennedy joins us from the North Lawn to explain how the president's responding to all of this. Ben?
Well, John, Jenna, President Trump is ramping up his attacks on Democrats as House Republicans zero in on the whistleblower complaint. Moments ago, the president faced questions in the Oval Office after swearing in the Secretary of Labor. Take a listen.
Mr. President, do you now know who the whistleblower is, sir?
Well, we're trying to find out about a whistleblower. When you have a whistleblower that reports things that were incorrect.
Trump is also calling out the rule change to accept secondhand information, tweeting who changed the long-standing whistleblower rules just before the submittal of the fake whistleblower report. Drain the swamp. The president spent today defending his actions and that he deserves to meet his accuser. Trump said he also wants to meet the person who he said illegally gave this information. As you know, the whistleblower complaint laid out evidence that President Trump tried to pressure a foreign government to interfere in the 2020 election.
I made a call. The call was perfect. When the whistleblower reported it, he made it sound terrible.
And you heard him there. President Trump has repeatedly tried to dismiss the significance of this call with Ukraine's president, saying there was no pressure on their part. Yes, the commander-in-chief did withhold military aid from Ukraine, a move he insists was not an attempt to put pressure on Ukraine's president. Republicans have been quick to attack the idea of impeachment, but are not rushing to defend the president's actions. John, Jenna?
Ben Kennedy at the White House. Thanks, Ben.
Well, Robert Jeffress is a spiritual advisor to President Trump and the pastor of First Baptist Church in Dallas. Pastor Jeffress, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So this morning, the president, he tweeted something that you had said on Fox News. This is a quote. If the Democrats are successful in removing the president from the office, which they never will be, it will cause a civil war-like fracture in this nation from which our country will never heal. Pastor Jeffress, what exactly did you mean by that?
Well, I was very careful in the words that I chose. I was not predicting and certainly not advocating an actual civil war in our country. But what I did say was that if the Democrats are successful for the first time in history in removing a president from office, I believe it will cause deep and lasting divisions in our country, just like the Civil War did. You know, the Civil War ended 160 years ago, but our nation has not yet completely healed from that experience. I believe in the same way, if a duly elected president who received the votes of 63 million Americans is removed from office, it's going to cause lasting wounds in our country.
Pastor, you say you weren't advocating for civil war, but Illinois Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger, an Iraq and Afghanistan war veteran, responded to your comment. He said on Twitter, quote, "I visited nations ravaged by civil war. I have never imagined such a quote to be repeated by a president. This is beyond repugnant." Pastor, what do you say to those like Congressman Kinzinger who find your comment offensive?
Well, I would just ask them to read the comment. And if they come away with that conclusion that I'm advocating or the president is a civil war, it means they either can't read or they're too stupid to understand what we're saying. Nobody is calling or advocating for a civil war.
I believe maybe some of the controversy, and I don't know because I can't get into the heads of all the people who've criticized your tweet, but maybe it has something to do with drawing the comparison between a political fight and the Civil War, an event that cost the lives of more than 600,000 Americans and brought on 4 years of bloodshed. Was there maybe a little bit of a bad idea to use the Civil War as the analogy?
No, it was a perfect idea, because what I was talking about was the spirit, the fraction of the spirit of America that lasted long after the war had ended. And talking about that kind of divisiveness, I think it's a parallel situation to what we're experiencing right now. Look, our nation is already divided. I believe that this kind of action by the Democrats 1 year before an election is just adding fuel to the fire. And I believe that Nancy Pelosi is sincere about praying for America and praying for leadership in this. She would set this aside and let the voters decide 1 year from now about whether President Trump should remain in office. But I believe the reason the Democrats are moving so quickly on this impeachment effort is they've tried everything else they can to get this president out of office. It hasn't worked. They're scared to death about 2020. They're becoming increasingly aware of the fact that they can't beat Donald Trump legitimately in 2020, and this is the only way they can remove him.
Pastor Jeffress, were you surprised that President Trump tweeted your comment?
Nothing President Trump does ever surprises me, but this was, for context, from a Fox and Friends interview that I did yesterday. But the president watches everything. Hardly anything escapes his notice.
One last question. We have a little less than a minute left, but we want to ask you, clearly we're living in a time of division. Jesus, in his last words to his disciples, said that I pray that you may all be one. What role can Christians play in a time like this, this divisive and polarized time?
Well, I think we ought to do whatever we can to bring healing, but not at the expense of truth. You know, truth always divides people. And I believe that the truth is that this president has been the most pro-life, pro-religious liberty, pro-Israel, pro-conservative judiciary president in history. And that's why we need to stand behind him. And I would say to all Americans, let's pray for America, but let's do more in addition to praying. Let's take action. Daniel 11:32 says, the people who know their God shall stand firm and take action. I think Christians need to let their representatives know that they should not support impeachment, that they need to stand with this president.
All right, Pastor Robert Jeffress, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, it is unprecedented. A whistleblower, his identity unknown, his testimony based on hearsay, all of it leading to an impeachment inquiry.
But did the intelligence community change the rules? Amber Strong has the latest on the report that's roiling Washington.
The whistleblower at the center of a complaint that helped launch an impeachment inquiry into President Trump is expected to testify privately before Congress if lawmakers can ensure that his identity is safe. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says the decision to launch an impeachment inquiry was based on several factors.
It's not just what happens in the call, it's part of the sequencing of events as well. You withdraw a couple $100 million worth of assistance to a country and then a couple of days later say, by the way, can you help me with my campaign, in other words.
It's all hearsay. You can't get a parking ticket conviction based on hearsay.
Trump attorney Jay Sekulow claims the whistleblower rules recently changed.
The form that so-called whistleblowers fill out used to say this: in order to find an urgent concern credible, the Inspector General must be in possession of reliable, first-hand information. That was on the form, literally, until apparently very recently.
The complaint says Mr. Trump pressured Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky to investigate political rival Joe Biden and his son Hunter's dealings in Ukraine. The president's defenders call the whistleblower biased.
The Inspector General says there's an indicia of arguable political bias. That is Washington speak for this guy didn't like the president.
That same Inspector General, however, called the complaint credible. President Trump's former security advisor saying he's troubled by the call.
It is a bad day and a bad week for this president and for this country if he is asking for political dirt on an opponent.
Democratic members of the House have launched a slew of subpoenas against the State Department and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo.
I have to imagine they're going to fight us tooth and nail. And yet, even as they do, the more that they fight to try to prevent and obstruct the lawful functions of Congress, the more they're going to make a case for impeachment on obstruction of justice.
Meanwhile, the Biden campaign sent a letter to major news networks calling on them to stop having Trump lawyer Rudy Giuliani on their shows, claiming he's spreading debunked conspiracy theories. Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi has a message of her own for the White House.
Speak the truth and let us work together to have this be a unifying experience, not a dividing one for our country.
But recent polling suggests the country is divided. While there's increasing support for impeachment, it mostly falls along party lines. Amber Strong, CBN News in Washington.
Here now for more is Caitlin Conant, political director at CBS News. Caitlin, good to have you.
Hi, thanks so much for having me, guys.
So CBS has a new poll out. I'm sure you know well of. The majority of Americans now approve of this impeachment inquiry. This is pretty striking on its face, Caitlin.
Right. So, as you said, a majority of Americans now support an impeachment inquiry. I think it's important to point out, though, that there are still sharp partisan divides when it comes to whether or not they support actually impeaching President Trump. They think that the evidence is there to at least start an inquiry, but you've got a majority of Democrats who think what he did with regards to his call with Ukraine was improper and warrants impeachment. But on the other side, a majority of Republicans don't think that what he did was improper, and even if they do, they might not think it's illegal. So we still see some very sharp partisan divides on that.
President Trump retweeted Pastor Robert Jeffress. It sparked some controversy. You just heard Pastor Jeffress explain what he thought. Your thoughts?
Well, again, I think we're living in highly polarized times, which the pastor referenced as well. And that rhetoric is reflected all the way to the top, to President Trump himself. And you see people right now, and our polling has showed this too, where it's not just what I think is right and the other side is wrong, it's the other side is the enemy. And I think we're about to see a much worsening of this situation when it comes to impeachment, because it's just going to further those divides even more.
Right.
Mitch McConnell, he says that he would have no choice but to hold a trial for impeachment if the House goes through and impeaches the president. There's not a lot Mitch McConnell can do here, Caitlin. His hands seem pretty tied.
Right, and I think now we're going to see how this plays out in the 2020 primary on the Democratic side, too, because they're realizing this is going to happen. And that has different implications than just talking about it in theory. So today in New Hampshire, we saw Bernie Sanders say, it's one thing to dislike the president, it's another thing to impeach him. And Bernie Sanders said, I'm going to be on the jury, and I'm going to have to see the evidence. So it'll be interesting to see how these candidates start to navigate it as this gets closer and closer.
Perfect segue. Meanwhile, there is a campaign going on. So what do you make of Joe Biden's campaign response to the impeachment inquiry?
So Joe Biden right now is trying to stay above the fray, and he doesn't want to give this any more oxygen because he thinks there's no evidence of any wrongdoing with his son or what he did, and that this has been debunked time and time again. But by not being more on the offense about this, he's running the risk of President Trump muddy the water and define this issue for him. The Trump campaign has spent almost $10 million in advertising on this. And you're seeing the other candidates start to get asked about Biden and getting questions like, if you had a child, would you let them be doing this business with foreign leaders? And they're having to say, oh, you know what, I actually wouldn't. So by not responding more proactively, they're running the risk of Donald Trump painting him as part of the D.C. swamp and being a Washington insider. And that's exactly what he came here to break up.
Today we learned that Congressman Chris Collins from New York, that he will be stepping down. This is another Republican, Caitlin, who will not be running in 2020.
Right, and he is expected to plead guilty for charges of insider trading. So it's interesting. It's bad news for the GOP, but I'm even have more of a look on Texas, which today saw its 6th congressional Republican retirement. And Texas is a state that the Democrats have long been saying the past few cycles they're going to turn it blue. So I'll be watching to see whether or not maybe this is the year.
All right. Caitlin, we always appreciate having you on. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Caitlin.
Coming up, we explain why U.S. health officials are investigating a mysterious vaping-related illness. That story next.
Introducing the CBN Bible from CBN.com. Now, an easier way to study the Bible and grow in your faith. Highlight your favorite verse. Read separate versions at a glance. Click and read a commentary. Or cross-reference your favorite verse using the Strong's Concordance. all the right tools to study the Bible, all in one place. The CBN Bible, available at cbn.com/Bible or the iTunes App Store.
It has the power to influence weight loss, boost your immune system, and improve brain function.
We've seen an explosion of data on the role of the gut microbiome in health.
The free Build a Better Gut booklet reveals the latest information about the gut microbiome. You'll discover how your gut affects the rest of your health.
The gut microbiome has been linked to depression and cancer and heart disease.
Learn how to build a stronger, healthier gut.
The microbiome, if it's in good composition, are really protecting us all the time from more invasive things.
Get the Build a Better Gut booklet, free from the Christian Broadcasting Network. Call 1-800-700-7000 or go to cbn.com/buildabettergut.
You need to make sure that your microbes are working with you, not against you.
And if you order online, you'll get immediate access to the Build a Better Gut series, a digital copy of the booklet, and related bonus material. Build a Better Gut today. Call 1-800-700-7000 or go to cbn.com/buildabettergut for your free copy.
Here, we're committed to a heritage of rigorous scholarship dating back over 1,000 years.
And to a faith tradition dating back 1,000 more.
This is how we create a culture of inquiry where no topic is off limits.
And a culture of hope.
Anything's possible!
It's Christian leadership.
And it's changing the world for the better.
It's higher learning.
It's greater knowing.
It's what makes us whole.
It's what makes us Regent.
Welcome back. The death toll from vaping-related lung illnesses is on the rise.
Yeah, there are now at least 13 deaths related to vaping and nearly 1,000 reported cases of vaping-related illnesses. The number of cases across the country has sprung up 52% this past week, according to the Centers for Disease Control, which puts the total number at more than 800 reported cases. Federal officials are working to determine the cause of the mysterious illnesses. CBN News health reporter Lori Johnson has more on what we know.
Electronic cigarettes burst onto the scene about 10 years ago and quickly became so popular among young people, the Surgeon General calls teen vaping an epidemic. Users suck on a mouthpiece, which heats liquid nicotine into a vapor that is inhaled. Initially, manufacturers claimed e-cigs would help adults quit smoking. The bigger result, however, teenagers, many of them non-smokers, picked up the vaping, enticed by sweetly flavored nicotine like Berry Burst in bright packaging resembling candy wrappers.
Vaping in teenagers is something that is causing harm to our kids, and we want that message to be loud and clear.
Since e-cigs are relatively new, little is known about their long-term impact, particularly on youngsters. Health officials, though, are sounding alarms about a spike in breathing problems and lung damage among teens after vaping. 4 cases in Minnesota, up to 12 in Wisconsin, 6 in Illinois, and at least 1 in Florida. Chance Amarata rushed to the hospital with a collapsed lung.
It felt like I was having a heart attack, and it was just insanely scary.
Chance says his doctors told him he had a condition made worse by vaping. Now on Instagram, he declares nicotine is rotting our brains and destroying our bodies, adding how many more kids are going to have to get hospitalized for us to stop. Another teen, Dylan Nelson, was placed in a medically induced coma after vaping, according to his brother.
Trauma that he's caused to his lungs is significant.
While doctors can't confirm it yet, they believe these acute, aggressive lung injuries appear to be caused by e-cigs.
We recognize that it is not a result of infection, like viruses or bacteria. It looks more similar to injury from an inhalation of some kind of a caustic substance. The body is actually reacting to something that's been exposed to or deposited along the lining of the lung.
Research shows teens who use e-cigarettes are more likely to start smoking regular cigarettes, and continued nicotine use can make other drugs like cocaine more pleasurable. Lori Johnson, CBN News.
When we come back, why Google could be in hot water with Congress over antitrust issues again.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com. Want to be a part of a community that inspires your spiritual growth while winning prizes? The all-new MyCBN app. Connect with the community for prayer and encouragement. Track and set spiritual goals. Enjoy conversation starters with friends and family. And collect points to win prizes. The all-new MyCBN app. A great place to belong. Download the app at cbn.com/mobile. Grow, connect, have fun. The all-new MyCBN app.
Watch breaking news, in-depth exclusive stories and programs, from health to entertainment, you won't find anywhere else. The CBN News Channel, a perspective you can trust. Enjoy credible news reporting from around the world. Discover inspiring programs and stories of hope, all in one place, from a Christian perspective. The CBN News Channel, a perspective you can trust. Check your local listings or visit cbnnewschannel.com.
Come home to the sounds of Southern Gospel from CBN Radio. You'll enjoy a rich Southern blend of bluegrass, classic gospel, and Southern gospel favorites like the Gaithers, the Crab Family, and bluegrass sounds like Mountain Faith. So make yourself at home with the all-new CBN Southern Gospel, now available at cbnradio.com.
Congressional investigators are looking into whether a new Google standard violates antitrust rules. At issue is a new Google Internet protocol that House Judiciary Committee members worry would give the tech giant a competitive advantage. House investigators are asking Google for information about how the new protocol and whether it will be used by Google and parent company Alphabet, Inc. for any commercial purposes, and whether it will make it harder for others to access consumer data.
And here with us now is Chris Lewis. He is an expert on antitrust issues and the president and CEO of the Public Knowledge Group. Chris, help us understand what's going on here with Google, what they're planning, and how it affects us, the users.
Right. So this shift of how they use DNS, which is stands for Domain Name System, is something that has actually been working its way through the entire industry. So the DNS is when you go to a website, when you type in a domain name, this is the server that you talk to on the internet that makes sure that you get to the right location on the internet. So one of the benefits of third-party or DNS services that are independent of the internet service provider is that it can give the user or a community group levels of protection for children and other content moderation that can be really beneficial. So we see sometimes schools and school systems subscribe to third-party DNS services where it can be tailored to their needs, so that certain websites, when they are looked up by the user, you can't get to those websites. So we're thinking adult material and things that are inappropriate for children.
Right. Now, Chris, Google says that these changes are about security and privacy. Is that true?
I think that's true. It doesn't mean that that a company that is offering DNS services, whether it's Comcast or whether it's Google or Cloudflare, can't collect that data and use it for other purposes. And this is why a comprehensive privacy bill is so important right now, and why all industry stakeholders, including consumer advocates like me, are pushing for this.
This is not the first time that Google has drawn scrutiny over antitrust issues. Are they asking for it with this latest change? And why do they keep getting in hot water?
Right. So I don't think this is an instance of them asking for it. I think this is an industry-wide move that needs to be understood by policymakers. It's good policymakers are asking questions about this so they can understand the technology that makes the internet work. it doesn't mean that there aren't competitive concerns. I don't think this is probably a direct antitrust concern because there's so much competition in the marketplace. I named all the other DNS providers. Right. But we do want to keep track of how a big company like Google or even a company like Mozilla that has a popular browser collects and uses this data.
So you don't think that this will relate to the ongoing investigations about antitrust?
I think it's smart for the antitrust officials on the Hill to ask questions and to understand how the technology works to see if there are possible competitive harms. But at the moment, it's hard to see how there are competitive harms in such a competitive marketplace.
All right, Chris Lewis, we always appreciate your time.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Coming up, celebrating the Jewish New Year. Stay tuned for a message from our very own Pat Robertson.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
On October 1st, 1961, history was made when a tiny station began transmitting the first signals of the Christian Broadcasting Network.
CBN, the Christian Broadcasting Network.
And now, a new era has begun with the all-new CBN News Channel.
Just moments ago, the Iron Dome intercepted an incoming rocket right on the Gaza border.
Administering in this area, spiritual warfare is definitely involved.
A 24/7 news network, bringing you the news you want from a source you can trust.
In Kenya, 40% of the medical services are actually provided by these Christian hospitals.
Let's talk about the economy.
Believers here are joining together to win people to Jesus Christ.
All your favorite shows now in one place. Go to CBNNewsChannel.com to find out how to get the CBN News Channel on your TV all day, every day. CBN News.
Finally tonight, the celebration of Rosh Hashanah is a time to reflect on the past year and look forward to the year ahead. The sounding of the shofar horn at dusk Sunday night signaled the beginning of the Jewish New Year all around the world.
CBN's founder, Pat Robertson, joined in the holiday festivities last night with a prayer for a time of renewal, planning, and expectation.
We're getting ready to meet the King. Praise God. Father, I thank you for this time. I thank you for tabernacles. I thank you for Jesus. I thank you for the lid of covering. I thank you, Lord, for the mercy seat. Thank you for the sacrifice on the cross. I thank you for all the good things that you've done.
I think that's a prayer we can all agree with.
Yeah. And Shana Tova to all our Jewish brothers and sisters out there.
That's right. That's going to do it for tonight's Faith Nation.
Have a great night.